My guest today is Emma Dowd, a life coach, entertainer, media personality, and more importantly, my friend. In today's episode, Emma and I talk about why we're overly self-critical about how we look when we look in the mirror. Welcome to Psychology.
Hey, how you doing, James?
I am doing well. We had a couple little hiccups here before we started, but I am really glad you're on my show. You've actually been on my show quite a few times. And when I was thinking about this earlier, I've known you since 2017. And so it's quite a long time. So it's nice to get to have you come on my show. But before that, actually, as I'm rambling here, I actually knew you as Jason. Why don't you explain what that even means and who you are today, and a quick little backstory on that.
Sure. I mean, very quickly, when you say something like that, obviously the first thing out of somebody's mouth is that they're transgender. And I'm not. And that was the biggest problem that I've had, and one of the biggest fights that I've had throughout my life. I found out when I was about 18 in 1996 that I was actually intersex. And so therefore, I was raised as a boy. I thought I was a boy. My mind was not male at all. My actions were not male at all. And I had to pretend to be that boy. When I got through and found out that I'm an XX chromosome and I'm CAH, which is congenital adrenal hyperplasia, I realized that is what caused my genitals to be ambiguous, which were then fixed when I was a child. And so I didn't know any of this was happening. So I was raised as a man thinking I was a gay man at best, and I had no problem with that. But in 1997 in school, you would probably gotten killed for that. Just saying. And at the same time, especially here in Florida, and so that was one of the things that I was worried about. But that made so much more sense. And what I thought I had was like an ulcer, a potentially bleeding ulcer. I started realizing it goes away. Ulcers don't go away. And so when they did the testing, that's when they pretty much found out that I had a uterus and I was having a period. However, there's nowhere to go. So it was different ways of looking at different things. A transgender is usually somebody that has gender dysphoria and cannot stand to see themselves in their bodies as they are, because they don't see that. And so it's a choice. I didn't have a choice. I was born this way. It's a medical condition.
Yeah. That's one thing I think many people may not understand is intersex versus transgender. Yes, intersex is a medical disorder. And so with that, when they say sex, what they mean is just the primary sex characteristics, which is our obvious genitalia as well.
Yeah, it's chromosomes. It's and you can have like an XXY, which would technically make you male. But sometimes even that, they're not truly male either. So it kind of depends on how you grow. And that's one of the things that I've always been a proponent for, is just let them choose.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Especially, I know you didn't know that until you're 18, but yes, I agree with you as far as that is something how they naturally evolve into the person that they're supposed to be. Now, for you though, becoming Emma or being Emma, because that's who you are, when you look in the mirror, what do you see?
I see an absolute train wreck. A lot of it has come from, I think, many, many years of being bullied for my looks and saying how ugly I was and being taught down negatively too. Obviously, some of the mannerisms that I was portraying and some of the things that I was saying wasn't aligning with a man that would do, and so therefore they would beat me up on top of that. So many years of abuse and being mentally and physically bullied. I look in the mirror, and now that I see what I did to myself with the testosterone, I see a lot of male characteristics, and I don't know how to get rid of that, and I can't. It came from the testosterone that I took, my voice, everything else. And it's not that I minded being a man. It's not that I minded being a woman, because I don't have that problem. It doesn't bother me. Whatever somebody wants to call me, they can call me. But that is not what I see now. And I see the damage that I did. And so basically, the best way I could say it is that when I go in front of the mirror, I'll look at myself and it looks like I'm like, way overweight, or I have my shoulders are so big that the rest of my body doesn't comply to it. My hair is disgusting. I've lost my hair. I got a big nose. I got big ears. I got big hands. I'm tall. I'm not your typical female. But then I also have to look at it too, where some of it came from my family. And this is kind of how my whole family is. So it's like, I see the most ugly thing that you could possibly imagine inside of there. I have not been able to completely get out of it. And people have yelled at me about it, and I destroy myself when I see myself in the mirror. And that's one of the things that bothers me the most, is looking in the mirror.
Yeah, and I'm sure many people can relate with that as well. I mean, maybe not necessarily your story, but they can look in the mirror and say, "Gosh, I don't like certain things about myself." One little, I guess, life hack that I always tell people is when you have to look in the mirror, you ask yourself before you do that, "How am I feeling right now?" Because if we're already in a negative mood or a hypersensitive mood, that mood is then going to influence us for how we look at ourselves in the mirror. And so sometimes people think, "Well, I'm just looking at myself in the mirror." That's true. However, if you have those types of thoughts that you have, the hypercritical aspect of it is just going to hurt you. And so it is important to say, if I'm going to be analyze myself, how I look, how am I feeling first? And so if you are in a pretty good mood, that's going to influence you as well. So I often recommend do that, because then you can see you have more perspective about things. Yeah, you might not like things, but it's not going to affect you as much as if you're already in a negative mood as well. So there's different types of versions of how people can be self-critical. We have our normal everyday stuff when we look in the mirror, and then we have stuff, perhaps that may be more difficult for you. As for your story, obviously you were born a certain gender, raised a different gender, and then now you're back to the original gender than which you were born. However, with that, so yours is going to be a little nuanced. Now, there's another version of that, which is body dysmorphia. So body dysmorphia is this mental health disorder that people have. And so what that is an over I don't say fascination, but it's over awareness of how we see certain attributes about our body. If, let's say, for ears, if you think that your ears are too big, that's one thing. But when it becomes so debilitating, that's all you focus on, you can't work, that's the primary thing of everything you think about and want to fix it, it's just hyper focused on that. Unfortunately, that's truly body dysmorphia. And so with that, it's the over inability to live one's life because the person is fixated on something that other people cannot see, or that's within the normal parameters of what medical science would say this is, quote, normal. And so that's something, people who have the extreme version of that is truly body dysmorphia. So I think anyone listening today, whatever side of the spectrum you're on when it comes to just, quote, typical awareness of your body that you don't like versus true body dysmorphia, wherever you fall in line there, we can all relate that there are things we don't really like about ourselves. Emma, what's one thing that you typically do when you do have these thoughts? I mean, how do you, I'm sure at times you believe what you think, but how do you pull yourself out of it? What's the self-talk that you use, or what do you use to kind of counteract that?
Well, I can tell you about 2 weeks ago, I had such a bad episode, I couldn't leave the house and I refused to
Mm,
leave the house. Sometimes I don't even leave the house without makeup on, so I can at least cover up some of the damage that I have.
sure.
Those are some of the things that I do. But I'll tell you the most important thing I've learned to do. I
Mm,
don't care how bad I am. Usually, right after I wake up, that's when I'm the worst. I go
mm,
walking into the bathroom. I look in the mirror and I smile at myself. And then every time I do something, whether I brush my teeth, wash my face,
mm,
put on makeup, after I'm done, I always smile at myself because I'm trying to
mm,
tell myself, because I can see myself, that it's going to be okay. Um, the other day that I was going down, I don't remember exactly what the problem was, but it literally stopped me in my tracks. I didn't
mm,
talk to anybody. I didn't say anything to anybody. I was mortified about going to the mall because Fran needed to get a B12 shot,
mm,
and I couldn't get past the food court. So I went and sat
mm,
inside of the restaurant there until she got done, and then she came back because I could not go through the mall the way looking that I thought I looked.
mm,
And then I took a picture of myself, and everything started to seem, it wasn't so bad.
mm.
Maybe it
Okay.
was
Give
the
you a
trick
sense of reality.
photography, something like that. But I honestly, that one scared me. I've
Yeah.
never been. I have been a few times where I just don't want to leave, but I think
Mm,
it was my eyes. My eyes were really
mm,
bothering me that day. My stomach felt bloated
mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe I just needed to go to the bathroom. Maybe I
Sure.
had, maybe I was starting my period. I'm trying to remember how far along that was. But when I see that, that freaks me out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because remember, and of course you know this, but the feelings that we have based off of a self perception. So, for example, if I see myself in the morning and I don't like how I look, and I don't see myself get in the mirror till 4 or 5 hours later, what I'm doing is I'm taking that mental snapshot from 4 or 5 hours prior and using that same emotional feeling and tying those two things together. So therefore, I think, well, 5 hours later, I look the same, and those feelings are still the same. Because when we have a memory, what most people don't realize is that when we think about something or think about a memory, we're actually thinking about the memory from the last emotional. How to say this? So if I was feeling sad when I thought about a happy memory from 2 years ago, so okay, so I think about the happy memory. I'm sad, but it makes me a little bit happier. So now when I think about it again, what I do is I take the last time I thought about that memory, whatever that my emotional foundation was, that influences how I see it again. So something that could have been 100% happy over time, the more times we think about it, may not be 100% happy. It could maybe be 80% happy because every time we think about it, that previous mood kind of dilutes it. And so that's something to consider. If you see yourself early in the morning and then you look at yourself later, you're remembering yourself based off of the last time you saw yourself. And so that's why it's important to say, wait a minute, let's get a fresh perspective. And so that's why I think when you took the picture of yourself, you had a fresh perspective, and you're able to see how you truly looked in the moment, how you felt in the moment, as opposed to the memory that you had from earlier in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
One
pretty
thing
much it.
yeah. So with that as well, though, I mean, I like the fact that you smile. Why is smiling? Why is that something you chose to do?
When you smile, you literally train your brain to be okay. You're not coming at
Mm-hmm.
yourself angry. It's
Mm-hmm.
like you're giving yourself a positive note. And when you smile at yourself, you see yourself in one of the prettier or more handsome forms, because
Mm-hmm.
nobody is
Yeah.
very attractive if they have this big, grouse on their face. And so
Yeah.
if you sit there and smile at yourself, you can actually change your brain thinking, because you're showing yourself an act of kindness. And that kind of really demonstrates how powerful smile can be to even somebody walking
Mm-hmm.
down the street. Simply
Mm-hmm.
smiling at them could change their entire look, their entire day. And it does work for us too.
Yeah. I haven't really thought about this, and so when we look at people, when we give people direct eye contact, in certain manners, we're able to give each other oxytocin. So oxytocin is one of those hormones, the social hormone that allows a person to feel more connected, feel more they trust the other person, and there's a kind of a bond that's created. Even though it's a temporary bond, but it's this: I see you, you see me, we're okay. And I haven't thought about this, but I'm wondering, and it's probably obvious to people who do know this already, but with looking in the mirror to yourself, making eye contact, I wonder if you can give yourself oxytocin. I actually have never thought about that. I'm gonna have to do some research on that. But if that's the case, if that is true, people who do know that, feel free to reach out to me. You can go on Instagram and message me at James Miller Lifeology. And in that, yeah, just let me know, because I actually don't know that. All my training, I've never actually thought about that before. So if that's the case, that's a great way to do it. The other part of it is when it comes to smiling, as you said, the smiling component of it, it allows you to see yourself in a different way. So we assign or attribute smiling usually with good humor or someone that's safe. And so when that, I can see that you reflect that back to yourself as well. Yeah, that makes sense to me. However, what happens if you smile and then your self-talk is like, why are you smiling? And that creates this whole, life of its own.
I luckily have never really had that.
Okay,
I mean, it
good.
may affect me a little bit later. Like I could do
Mm-hmm.
it, I start to feel good, and then I go and see myself in I don't know, the reflection of my driver's side window as I'm trying to get inside the car, and it's like, ooh, wow. I mean, I look like a 70-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
drug addict that's been out there, and,
Yeah.
and I've seen myself like that. And
Well, I was going to say as well, that makes me think sometimes we have an idea of how we should look. And so do you have, and I'm sure, if I was talking to someone else, I would ask the same question. Do you have an idea of how you should look? Because there's a difference between how we should look versus, in a magazine. If I was in a magazine, I would look like this versus this is how I look when I wake up. And so understanding the appropriateness of how one looks for that specific time, for that specific activity, it's important to be realistic about that as opposed to going with our optimal self all the time, or some formal evening, some formal event where we're all dressed up and all, you know, it's a little bit different. So for you, do you have realistic metrics for how you should look per situation or have an idea
I
about
don't
that?
think it's realistic looks. I mean, I pretty much have an expectation of what I want to do. I want to have makeup on
Okay.
as much as I
Mm-hmm.
can. I want to have my hair nice and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I do realize I'm 40. I'm going to be 46 in November. So I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to be a spring little chicken, and that's okay
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah.
But I don't really have like a preset of this is what I'm going to look like. But I'll tell you, when I look in a mirror and then I go out and look inside of myself in a reflection of
Mm-hmm.
like a regular glass, I don't see the same thing at all. In fact, it's like a
Mm-hmm.
polar opposite. And I'm like, how is that possible? So even look at myself here on this, I don't look bad. But I'll tell
Mm-hmm.
you what, when I see it back, it's going to freak me
Yeah.
out. I'm not going to be, I
Interesting.
probably won't even, I don't usually go back and watch my stuff because of how badly it triggers me.
Interesting. So yeah, let's think about that for a second. So right now you're having a great conversation with me. Can you see yourself in the monitor right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So for those of you who are listening to us on the radio, we're actually doing a video of this as well. So you can once again go to jamesmillerlifeology.com and you can see this particular interview and watch Emma and myself talk about this. So, okay, so you can see yourself and you feel good. What do
Yeah.
you think is different later on, though, when it's just you looking at it?
I don't know, but I'm going to look at myself and I'm going to be like, "Oh God, look at that. Look at that manly face. Look at that. Look at those
Yeah.
big black circles under my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the wrinkles. Oh God, all the wrinkles. And
Mm-hmm.
look how fat I am down here, and I'm gonna pick myself apart.
Yeah.
I truly am. I did do one time I tried to do so. I was calling it the softer side of Emma because I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
be nice to myself. So at the
Yes.
just around Christmas time, before the New Year's Eve, I was going to take pictures of myself, and I destroyed my pictures. I'm not gonna lie.
Mm.
And so I was going to do them where I was going to show my legs because I was showing off my tattoo. And then the other part to that, I was going to show off I was going to like wrap myself in Christmas lights to illuminate
Yeah.
myself because Christmas and
Yeah.
the lights I love lights.
Yeah.
And,
The silhouette of that. Yeah.
and so I knew how bad I was going to look. And so at the same time, when I got them back, I promised myself, do not pick it apart.
Hmm.
Just appreciate it. And
Okay.
that's exactly what I did. I didn't pick myself apart. However, when we did the photos, I focused on some of my favorite features of my body as opposed to my face. And some of
Okay.
that lighting helped shadow a lot of the face so you can't see a lot of it. And I also used my hair and my hands and everything else to try to mask my face as much as I could. But yet at the same time, there's some of my favorite photos because it put me
Really?
into a position I wasn't ready to do. I was ready to pick my body apart, say, look how fat I am. Look at this, look at
Mm-hmm.
that. This toe is weird or something like that. I would have
Mm-hmm.
picked it apart. And yet at the same time, I saw myself and I said, you know what? That's not bad. And so I started it was a time to, no matter what I saw, no matter how I was feeling at that time, be kind to myself. Was
Yes.
not easy. It literally took every ounce of strength I had to not pick myself apart. And I still do it when I see it.
Yeah, it's interesting though. Yeah, I'm glad you don't pick yourself apart. I'm glad you're kind to yourself when you still see those photos. It is interesting though that often we put ourselves in situations where we're not kind to ourselves. For example, you decided to do this photo shoot. Well, if you historically pick yourself apart, why would you? Now, this is rhetorical. I'm not expecting you to answer this, but why would you, or why would a person put themselves in a position where they're going to be unkind to themselves, knowing that the camera is going to be on them, they're going to get all these proofs back, and looking at the proofs, we'll decide which one's the best. But if the person doesn't like how they look, why would they do that? So that's a huge question for all of us. Why do we keep putting ourselves in situations that makes us uncomfortable or that makes us tear ourselves apart? So for you, I'm glad you had that personal boundary that said, I'm going to look at this and I'm not going to tear it apart. So that is a very healthy thing to do. But I think the bigger picture as well is, why do we do the things that we know that's going to cause us to feel unkind to ourselves? However, I do remember just not too long ago, you had another photo shoot. You went to the beach and you took some photos of what?
I took myself in a bikini. And that was the first time I've actually worn a bikini where there would be more than one person. I did do one for a photo shoot that somebody sent me the bikini they wanted me to take a picture with. So I did it. But I was on a beach that was completely empty of people. And nobody else would have seen me but the photographer and this person. But this time was different because it was Memorial Day. And if you happen to know, the Tampa Bay area in Clearwater happens to have one of the best beaches in the United States. And that's where we were going. We were going out towards like Treasure Island. But because of something out there that happened on the road, the whole beach was shut down. And so there's emergency crews and everything else. So we decided to pull off and just sit at the causeway. Well, on the causeway, if you have any idea what a causeway is, it is shoulder to shoulder all the way down. I mean, there was literally cars parking in the water as the waves were rolling in. And so I knew at this point, there was no space between me or anybody else. I had to do this, and I got out and did it. I put myself in these positions, especially like the photography thing, because you can't overcome something if you don't attempt it. And so I know that it's going to be torture. I know that I'm going to be like, and stuff. And so at the same time, I have to put myself in these positions because I can't conquer the fear if I don't actually challenge the fear.
Yes.
Which is one of the biggest things that I've come up with along the way to try to help me win that. May not be the best for everybody, but for me, I have always been best with my back to the wall. And when I have my back to the wall is when I really come out swinging and I have a different mentality. So I have to put myself in those questionable positions and situations to get myself to just force through it. And sometimes the reward is bigger than the
Yeah.
challenge itself.
In psychology, we have what's called the systemic desensitization. And what that means is, so if you are afraid of something, for example, people are afraid of flying, and for you, it could be the fact of just going to the beach in the bikini. So whatever the goal is, the desensitization, that's a hard word for me to say. What you do is you go for the first part of that, as far as, if I were to say, when does the anxiety start for you? So if you see the anxiety is you're in your car on the way to the beach, okay, well then we're going to start a little bit before that. But you want to look at the whole progress, or process rather, of the event itself. And so it's learning how to sit with each step of the emotion, or each step of the scenario. And in that, you sit with it. And when you start to feel the anxiety, you start to work through that. So therefore, you're able to overcome, or to mitigate, or to be in control of the anxiety, so it doesn't control you. And so each step you work towards that, either in your mind, or the person goes to the event or goes to the location, they start to be able to practice it without actually having to do the full event. And so that's one thing people can do if they do struggle with that, is for each moment, sit with the feeling, work through that feeling. And then as you get closer and closer to the event, you work through that as well. So that's one thing to do. So yeah, just like you went to the full force, you went right to it and did it, which is fantastic. It sounds like it worked out well for you. Now, when you got the proofs back, when you saw the photos, what'd you think?
The one that I did with the bikini, I just shot in my own mirror, because
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go to the beach. I was going to do the cute pictures with my legs out and
Mm-hmm.
take the picture with my feet and the waves rolling, but I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't do that because obviously I'm
Yeah.
going to be
Oh,
on
sure.
top
Yeah.
of some guy's car. So I
Yeah.
had to kind of do it beforehand, which is good. I'm glad I did. Um, but as far as some of the other things that I did, it just took some time,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to just it all came out well. It really did. I was
Mm-hmm.
very pleased with what happened.
Good.
I'm also trying, because like and here's another good example. This is sun damage.
Mm.
Bothers the
Yeah.
living hell out of me.
Just a second. So Emma's
I
showing me on her shoulder some sun damage, for those of you who aren't seeing the video right now. Okay.
Yeah, because see, when I moved down here, it was Florida. We're supposed to be out in
Uh,
the sun at the beach and stuff like
yeah.
that. So I literally lived in the pool when I was like 12 to 14 years old. And sunscreen, that's just too much to do. I'm missing swimming time.
Yeah.
So at the same time, I miss swim. I wasn't going to miss swim time, but now I'm dealing with this, and it's all down my back. So one of the things I'm going to do is, because this side potentially could get cancer, this side
Mm.
is not as bad. I'm going to get a tattoo over here in the evening, which is why I'm wearing
Okay.
this, because they're going to need to take my shirt off. So this way they don't have to, they
Mm-hmm.
just go like this.
Yeah.
But as you can see, that sometimes would bother people, and to me that ages me. So by getting
Yeah.
a tattoo on it, it's going to blend it in as much, so it won't
Sure.
stand out like bam in my face. I have multiple sclerosis too, and so I have, like, you could probably see the indentation because I do have makeup on, but I have these big black circles under there, and it is, when I look at it, it
I can see.
reminds me that I'm dying, and
Oh,
that
that's a heavy
bothers me.
thought.
That's why I don't like to wear it without makeup anywhere. Inside the house, okay. But when I
Mm-hmm.
don't have makeup on, I don't like to look in the mirror because I see the effects that MS is doing and how it's beating
Mm-hmm.
me up. And
Yeah.
that can trigger things too. So generally I put on under eye corrector to make it
Mm-hmm.
blend it out a little bit. And then just getting the foundation on. Sometimes that's all it takes.
Yeah.
And I can be okay
That's,
with that. But it's a constant reminder that what I went through. I also have a
mm-hmm.
big, huge bald spot. It goes all the way back to here and here. I have to put stuff on there to kind of blend it in a little bit. But somebody, when I was in about 8th or 9th grade, I can't remember exactly which one. We were building a tree house, and one of my friends thought I was gay, so they decided they were going to break open a can of foam insulation on my face, and it
Yeah.
literally took away most of my hair there. And I have some
Mm.
on this side too. It's not as bad, but it's
Yeah.
there. And so when I see that, I look at the hate and see the hate that people had towards me. And that really bothers me as well. And it's not so
Yeah.
much the condition. If it was falling out naturally, it wouldn't be as bad. But to know that
Mm-hmm.
was caused by somebody else's hand that really wanted to see me hurt. Now I got to
Yeah.
live looking at that. And that's not something that it's easy to just push aside. So
Of
I try
course.
to do stuff to cover it up and make it look a little bit more presentable.
And I think that's the thing, when people do things to us, that is difficult because we already are feeling bad, and then all of a sudden we see what other people have done, and then I'm sure, I'm probably projecting here, a lot of rage comes out, a lot of such anger of like, that's not fair, which is not fair at all. But for you, you could live like that, or you could say, well, what can I do about that? I know historically you'll wear a scarf as well, like a bandana around your head as well. I know that's something you really found worked well for you. But yeah, there are lots of little tricks that people can do to help themselves. So there's a difference between sitting in the struggle or sitting in the this being hypercritical, or we could do something about that. One of my favorite quotes that kind of, I guess, details this is, trouble is inevitable, but misery is optional. So the trouble could be the hyper self-critical aspect of it. But if we live in that trouble, in quotations, then that's the miserable life that we're leading. So for you, you're able to find yourself, oh, what can I do so I don't live in that misery?
Yeah, you can't, because otherwise you don't do anything. And I am too stubborn to deal with that. But at the same time, I also have to realize it's okay. I
Yeah.
mean, if somebody doesn't think I'm pretty, that's their loss. If somebody doesn't like that I have these big bags under my, or big circles under my eyes from the MS, that's that's them. It's not
Yeah.
me. And the more that I have tried to train my brain to think like that, it helps me stay not so much of as a victim of what was happened
Mm-hmm.
to me, but as far as saying, okay, haha, you did that to me. Oh well, I'm going to
Yeah.
continue with my life. And
Mm-hmm.
but it is easier, and I'll tell you this: when you're being bullied, to attack yourself, because that's
It is.
something you can control, than to attack
Mm-hmm.
somebody else because of the other ramifications that come along with it. So it was easier for me to basically embellish what the bully was trying to do than it is for me to physically go and take on the bully, because at the
Yes.
time I could have been expelled from school. I could have been
Mm-hmm.
I could have had more friends jump on me, and because sometimes they go in
Mm-hmm.
groups, and those were scenarios I wasn't willing to chance.
Of course.
And
Of
so
course.
instead I took it upon myself to beat myself up, but I was being beat up because I was ugly, according to them.
Yeah.
So um, when you hear that over and over and over and over again, and I know I
Yes.
haven't really heard it in 20 some years, but at the same time, that still sticks inside your brain, because when you're a child, it's the most impressionable time for you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
see, I didn't develop like a normal person. In fact, I didn't start developing really any type of secondary characteristic, male or female, until I got to almost 18. And then when I started
Wow.
developing breasts, and I was like, hmm, there's
Yeah.
something I just won't be able to hide in the locker room, I'll tell you that much. So
Yeah.
at the same
Yes.
time, that was where I came up to stop it. And I also knew that if I didn't do that, I would be continued bullied even worse. People already thought I was gay, and they were beating me up because they thought I was gay.
Yeah.
They did horrible different things like that. And so it impacted me, and it still impacts me today. So I guess a message I'd like to hopefully people will hear is that the way you treat people, even if it's back then, can have lifelong effects on them all the way through. That bullying was only temporary, but the effects can last forever depending on who they are. And I'm lucky that I have a strong enough composition to say,
Mm-hmm.
it bothers me, but I'm not going to try to let it bother me. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I still pick myself apart. If I'm around my friends, I will pick myself apart, and it drives them
Mm.
nuts. And I feel so bad that I do that to them, because I love them to death. And
Yeah.
I know that they don't see that. But then sometimes I'm wondering, are you doing that just to humor me, or are you doing that because it's true? And
Yes.
so I don't believe what people have said about me. And I
One th-
barely believe the mirror.
one thing to also consider, we talked about the ideal version of this, of how we, the ideal version of ourselves that we see all the time or hope to see all the time. But there's also the aspect of what is one's body really able to do. Like, for example, if I'm 5'10" and a half. If I was like, oh, I wish I was 7 foot tall. Well, I physically can't do that. So why am I wanting to be something that I cannot be? Or if a person's a woman's a size 10, she wants to be a size 2. Well, if her body physically can't do that, well, that's unhealthy to be a size 2. And so it's looking at what are the normal parameters about one's body that they can stick within that. I'm not saying people can't grow and develop. That's different. But physically, if you can't do something, then you can't do something. So looking at, this is how it is. Now, what do I do with it? How do I help myself accept it in whatever format? So, that's something as well. I think sometimes people forget is, to want to do something or be something that you physically can't be, then that in itself is just setting yourself up to hate yourself even more, because that's genetically something you cannot do. And one last thing I'll say here as we wrap up, though, what you said earlier, as far as you heard this over and over, that is what we have is what's called a core belief. A core belief is really what we're told as a kid, or what we internalize, and that becomes the mantra or the self-talk we have all the time. I'm so ugly, I'm so stupid, what is wrong with you? Whatever that thought is, when you have that critical aspect, that is the repeated core belief that you were taught, or what you internalized when you were a child or when you were younger. And then that's going to come out all the time. So for you, for me, for all of us, we have a core belief, but you'll know what that is, what that core belief is, or how you truly see yourself, when you hear that certain sentence come up all the time. And so for you and the rest of us, when we hear that, we have to counteract that to say, that's what I was taught, but that's not necessarily the reality today. So if I'm using the previous version of myself to now look at myself in the mirror to tell myself, all I'm doing is just literally bullying myself. And so with that, I mean, I think the biggest aspect is we're just not being kind to ourselves.
We're not. And like you said, you can fix it. If you want to be 7 feet tall, there are things you could do. You could wear stilts. You could do things that are just not there. I have been tempted many, many times to go get a breast job, breast implants. I have been tempted many times to go get facial surgery. But, the one thing I do know, it's never going to be good enough. And if they don't do it absolutely perfect, I'm going to go into the knife again, and then again, and then again. I'm going to be spending tons and tons of money. And before I know it, I won't even look recognizable. I do admire, and I think it's one of my best qualities that I love about myself, is everything about me is real. My nails are real. I don't wear fake eyebrows. I don't wear fake eyelashes. This is my real hair. Unless it falls out, then I'll wear a wig. But for the most part, I'm just trying to live with it as is. Real breasts. Everything about me is real. And that helps me understand that I'd rather be real and imperfect than to be fake and still not perfect.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. That's chasing that perfect look. And the reality is that look changes all the time based on what the current trend is as well. So unfortunately, our time is up. I really enjoyed talking about this. I mean, there's so much more we could delve into, but I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate your candor. I appreciate you just sharing with us how you struggle with some of these things and giving people hope that there are ways to mitigate this. Or in other words, there are ways to work beyond that. So if my viewers and listeners want to find out more information about you, to learn all about you, to watch your stuff, to look at your stuff, where do they find all this information online?
EmmaLynnDowd.com. It's the easiest hub that you can go to. I put up stories. I talk about different things. I expose things. I have my videos there. I have my life coaching, public speaking, everything you could possibly imagine is right there. Also, any social media, I'm on everything, and it's all Emma Lynn Dowd, just like my website. I did a really good job branding that one.
Yes,
and
you did.
So you can just simply go to any of them. I have X, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. So
awesome. My viewers and listeners also know that if they can't find this information any other place, simply go to the show notes at jamesmillerlifeology.com, and I'll connect you with Emma Lynn Dowd. Thank you once again, Emma. I really appreciate all your time today.
Thanks for having me.